What is a book that completely ducked you up after reading? Or that you could not even finish? The Mystery of the Exploding Teeth by Thomas Morris. It is a collection of medical case reports from throughout history. The stories include stuff like a guy with a hernia so bad his scrotum was the size of a watermelon, and another guy who swallowed knives and had his digestive system basically rusted shut. I have a pretty strong stomach, but I felt queasy every time I read sections of that book. I finished it, and I will never open it again. Dude, my grandpa has a hernia and his balls are huge. Like you can't not notice it. He worked moving furniture his whole life. So I think that's how it happened. He's the kind of man who won't go to the doctor for anything if he can. And he's proud. So, won't let anyone near his nads. But I'm pretty sure just people wish he did. It's like worse than a grapefruit. He doesn't have ego love with it like that. But he does. I hate that shit. My grandfather died from ulcers, which was actually metastasized stomach cancer. He was apparently the same way. Or Thousand Splendid Suns. Such a good book, but very sad. The author is a genius. That and The Kite Runner made me ugly cry multiple times. Oh, I came here to write about Kite Runner. The author writes beautifully, and I know it's important to the stories that they are heartbreaking, but I could not continue after the scene where Amir leaves Hassan behind. The people who read the book probably know which one I'm talking about. And of course, when I skipped ahead a bit, I landed on a similar terrifying scene. It's a bit ironic that I felt a bit like I was betraying Hassan as well when I stopped reading, because it felt to me like I was running away from the situation just like Amir. I never read the book, but I saw the film when I was only about 12 years old. I do not remember anything except the scene you are talking about, which scared the absolute crap out of me and really messed me up for a while. I was a bit sheltered, and I did not really know much about sex, let alone you know what. Oh Jesus, you were 11. I was like 18 or something, and I was still messed up by it. How did you came across such a movie at that age? And that's not even the only disturbing scene. The Amber Spyglass by Philip Pullman. I was messed up for weeks after I read the parts leading up to the ending. This one got me too. It was the first series I read on my own. That ending was pretty much when I realized that not all stories have a happy ending, and no matter how hard you fight or what's fair doesn't mean you're going to get what you want or deserve. It was a pretty rough realization for little kid me. While the series has a happy ending in the greatest scope of things, that series is kind of brutal for the gut punches it delivers to wide-eyed kid readers. The ending of book 1 is a tragedy delivered by a trusted, idolized parental figure. The ending of book 2 has most prominent allies dead or unreachable. One protagonist alone and the other in an induced coma in custody of the last person they want anything to do with. Book 3, you are so ready for an earned happy ending to arrive, but it only comes as an optimistic hope for the future, and the characters who have sacrificed the most to accomplish it still have to sacrifice more for nothing in return. Because it is simply how the universe works. The author loves allowing the characters to briefly have what they have often spent their entire lives yearning for, only for it to be irreparably ripped from them the moment they become aware they finally have it. Incredible books, important lessons, massively unfair. The HBO BBC adaptation is currently running link on hiatus for filming between seasons books 2 and 3. It is pretty fantastic. Certainly head and shoulders above the once attempted movie adaptation of the first book that omitted the book's most important themes and symbolisms at fear of offending religious audiences, and then cut the ending off the movie entirely because it was too depressing. So the movie sort of just ends in the middle of a scene right before the climax of the first book, and no attempt was ever made to continue in a sequel. I wonder how much was spent to cast Daniel Craig as Lord Asriel, only to end up cutting most of the very few scenes he appeared in, and then never continuing the series to the point that he returns to complete the goal that all those deleted scenes were setting him up for in the first place. Frankly, I'm still confused that they greenlit a 3-film package marketed as a family-friendly fantasy adventure with talking animals without ever apparently realizing that the main villain is the Catholic Church with the serial numbers filed off, and the very concept of organized religion itself. It is closer to diesel punk alt history Gnostic fiction. The author once described a goal of his with the series as talking kids out of Christianity. Someone ducked up pushing to option this series for a mainstream appeal movie franchise. I'm just as disappointed at Philip Pullman for giving the go-ahead on such a toothless take on the story. But I also recognize that few people ever get to be offered blockbuster budget Hollywood movie trilogies based on their work, accompanied by a paycheck that basically would maintain the average person for life. I read American Psycho in high school after I watched the movie. Holy shit, is a different tone than the movie. There were parts in the book that legit made me nauseous. It has been over 20 years since I have read it, and those sections are still clear in my mind and I have never felt the desire read it again. American Psycho haunted me for days. Some parts of the book are practically unreadable. I do not know what possessed me to read it again. What was so bad? I always find myself commenting about this book when it comes up over and over because it just is hard to forget, and is probably worse than you are thinking. It is ducking brutal with depictions of torture, murder, rape, etc. The worst part is that most of the book is super monotonous cataloging of the New York yuppie lifestyle. Then it just basically jump cuts to pornography or smut style violence out of nowhere, and then back to the daily routine again. It is super jarring. It is literally 1000x more graphic than the movie. Somebody already mentioned breaches above this. If you are curious, just look up American Psycho rat and I'm sure you will get some answers. Or nail gun. Just be warned. It is horrible. My friend read the rat scene out loud to me when I was 18. 26 years later, it still lives in my head. They Cage the Animals at Night. An autobiography of a man who was bounced in and out of orphanages and foster homes pretty much his whole childhood because his mom would have nervous breakdowns and send all her kids away. I read it in the 7th grade. It made me openly cry so many times and just leaves you feeling hollow. The only reason I want to ever acquire wealth would be to try and get as many kids out of the system because of this book. What an absolutely heart-wrenching autobiography. I read it in one day and cried too. There is videos of him in the early 2000s giving lectures, and he still has Doggy by his side. The Conspiracy Against the Human Race. It is a philosophical non-fiction book written by a horror author about how consciousness was the worst thing that evolution created. It is extremely dark and pessimistic. Basically the polar opposite of a happy life self-improvement book. If this is the author I'm thinking. He has a brain condition related to depression but much more extreme that prevents him from feeling happiness whatsoever. Like his brain is incapable of it in even the smallest amounts. He has never felt it kind of thing. I have not read any of his stuff, but I can only imagine how heavily that would shade his narrative perspective. Anhedonia gang. I got that shit too. Though luckily I'm not a pessimist. Though I cannot feel that much joy myself. I can still feel the warmth of others' joy, which makes me content. And I can feel some kind of warmth when I help others, even though it's not something I would be able to describe as joy. I hope you are doing well. So wonderful that despite your condition you are not a pessimist. My brain is pretty average and still I find myself overly pessimistic sometimes. Take care. Baby Teeth by Zoj Stage. The basic premise is, well, this mom has an elementary age daughter who won't speak. The book goes back and forth between their points of view. Basically, the girl doesn't want the mom around, so she'll have her dad all to herself, and has decided to make her mom's life miserable. The mom has her own issues, and she wants her life back. The dad is pretty oblivious, and doesn't understand how malicious evil the daughter is being. I couldn't finish it. It was too disturbing. Sounds a lot like We Need to Talk About Kevin. It was very much like that, but maybe because you get chapters from the disturbed child's path, it's even more chilling. I didn't finish it, so I don't know if she shoots up a school. The Road. I've never felt existential dread like I did while reading that novel, and I've read Lalita and the 120 Days of Sodom without blinking an eye. Johnny Got His Gun is a close second. The Road is quite harrowing. I think 2 other Cormac McCarthy books are even more unsettling, All the Pretty Little Horses and Blood Meridian. Most disturbing was Blood Meridian. An unbreakable downward spiral. Blood Meridian is phenomenal. The greatest novel that can never be made into film in my opinion. I love Blood Meridian. but one quote I cannot forget illustrates why that book is considered obnoxious to read. They departed the campfire in their wake like some ignis fatuus belated on the road behind them which all could see, and of which none spoke. For this will to deceive that is in things luminous may manifest itself likewise in retrospect, and so by slate of some fixed part of a journey already accomplished, may also post men to fraudulent destinies. If you are not an avid reader, that can come across as pretentious. Word salad. Oh man. That was about 2 times longer than it needed to be. As an avid reader, that is still word salad. I guess McCarthy does not really punctuate much, but with a sentence like that it really stands out. The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath always messes me up pretty bad. Don't read it if you deal with suicidal feelings ideation. It starts out strong, and then takes a turn about midway through. For me it was kind of the opposite. I read it after just having left a closed psychiatric ward for that specific reason, and it felt kinda cathartic instead. But I could very well see how it could have the opposite effect on someone. I don't know who said it first, but I love the quote. Art comforts the disturbed and disturbs the comfortable. Marabou Stalk Nightmares by Irvine Welsh was really disturbing. I think I donated it after finishing it, because I didn't even want to have it around anymore, and didn't feel comfortable giving it to anyone I knew. Just seeing the cover makes me uncomfortable even now. Brave New World also really messed me up for a long time. I like Irvine Welsh, and have a lot of his books, but his writing leaves an impact. He is very good at writing terrible people that do terrible things, and you can't stop reading because you want to see them get their comeuppance. Filth is another great book that you don't want to reread for a while. The movie is accurate but loses some details. Oof yes. Filth. Reading from the parasite's perspective made me squirm. His work can isolate new readers. It is a feat to get past the thick Scottish accent and then the absolutely despicable character Cinereus. Once you are there though, his genius comes out and it's hard not to continue. One of my favorite writers, but definition not one easily read. Radium Girls by Kate Moore. It's not very well written in places, but the way these young women were treated by the company involved was so horrendous that I couldn't finish the book. There is an HBO or Netflix movie about the radium dial painters which barely touches on the worst parts. I won't write more because of spoilers in case anyone plans on reading it. Based on a true story, those nifty watches with their faintly luminescent dials bright enough to read in the trenches, but not enough to betray the soldier's location to the enemy. Perfect for the boys on the front lines. Probably would not have been so bad if they had not been using their mouth lip to keep a needle fine point on the paintbrushes. Watched a lot of history stuff with my dad as a kid. The women who worked in a munitions factory in England, I might be wrong here, who were literally stained yellow from the compounds, used as another story that pops into mind. I hadn't heard about the munitions factory workers, but I'll look into it. Thanks, I think. Other radium workers, did you know their bones glow and will continue to glow long after we're dead and buried ourselves? Heck, they glowed in the dark when they were alive. Some were buried in lead-lined coffins because their remains are radioactive. I also found it fascinating that radium was marketed as a miracle tonic. People drank the stuff. If I remember correctly from what I have read so far, most of the commercial radium products, like water and cosmetics etc., did not actually contain radium. They lied, basically, as it was more expensive to produce and relatively scarce for the demand. Less Than Zero by Bret Easton Ellis. Worse things happen in America Psycho, but the main character there is an adult and the one doing the horrible things. Most of the characters in Less Than Zero are 18 or younger, act like children, and are the victims. Night by Elie Wiesel. There is plenty that disturbed me about that book, given it is context, but the thing that bothered me most was when Elie can hear an older man yelling for his son, who he thinks is lost, except he was not lost. Elie saw the son abandon his father while they were marching, for fear that his father might slow him down. That scene stayed with me for a very long time. What I found most disturbing about this is not just the horrific treatment, it was the complete lack of control the people had over their own destiny. Somehow, a bad situation seems a little better if you can do something about it, even a little bit. But here, there was nothing you could do. You might die. Your father might die. You might be separated and never see each other again. It was not up to you, and there was nothing you could do about it. You just had to wait and see what happened. The feeling of powerlessness was haunting. There is a psychiatrist who went through similar circumstances and wrote about how he got through it. It became a basis for future therapy. Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Brave New World made me feel really awful after I was done with it. It is an amazing book. It also really scares me with all the parallels I can draw between the world it describes and our own. Huxley wrote another book, one of his last, where he depicts his vision for a society that is the antithesis of Brave New World. It is not necessarily a happier book, but I still recommend it. Island. Oh yeah, I did not even give the title. Thank you for the assist. It is the island mentioned in the world of Brave New World. BTW. One of the heroes is offered a place at the island by the director. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe for more videos.